Hi and welcome to the second part of the session 4, and here we will talk about the knowledge sharing. So if you remember, in the previous part of this session we talked about knowledge codification, and of course the first reason of codification was sharing. If we codify knowledge, we can share it much more easily. Let's then talk about knowledge sharing, and we'll come back to the codification. And there is a sort of paradox between the codification and sharing, which I would like you to reflect on when you see these two parts of the session together. But this is all about the knowledge sharing. So if you think about knowledge sharing, in the first place, it's very easy to think about knowledge sharing. You have an idea, you write it down, you send it to someone. You come up with the design of a software or an application or a device. You draw it, you create graphics of that, and then you show it to someone and people understand. You have an idea of a story, a book, you write it, and then it becomes your codified knowledge. But that's not so easy, because if you go to the daily work of organizations, you see more challenges or nuances. There are a lot of knowledge that we have, but we cannot actually explicate. One of the very known philosophers of knowledge and human knowledge, Michael Polanyi, says that we can say more than what we know. And some of the old surveys ask different experts how much of your knowledge you can codify. I mean, regardless of the pragmatic issues, you don't have time or other issues. No, if you had all these resources, how much of your knowledge can be codified? And the estimates in one of the surveys, which is known as the Delphi survey, is max up to 30% of a human expert's knowledge can be codified. 70% of the tacit knowledge cannot be codified or explicated. So this creates a little bit of a challenge in terms of codification, but even more in terms of the sharing of the knowledge, because then knowledge sharing is not only about moving or transferring codified knowledge, it's about sharing something which is partly codified and partly not codified, partly codifiable and partly uncodifiable. And some of the scholars, such as Nonaka, they have a little bit of an extreme perspective about knowledge sharing. Actually, they say if we think about many practical situations, the actual sharing of knowledge is almost impossible. Instead, you may stimulate the recreation of the knowledge in a new situation. So if organization 1 knows how to design electric cars, it's not that easy that this knowledge can be packaged and then sent to the second organization. No, you can find ways to stimulate the second organization to recreate that same knowledge that organization 1 has. And they talk about the complexity argument, because they say knowledge sharing or knowledge on its own is a whole complex network of elements. And if you just have a little piece of that, which is, for instance, that document or that procedure, you don't have the whole system of knowledge. You only have a very little element, and the rest needs to be combined in order to have this knowledge domain transferred. So therefore, knowledge sharing is not just simply transferring the codes or the codified knowledge. If we think about the reasons of knowledge sharing, you see in the literature, especially if you look at the book chapter of the Davenport, you see all the discussions about why experts, people, organizations, teams are willing to share knowledge and why they are not. And this is just a very simple overview of personal reasons that people have for sharing to the left and not sharing to the right, social reasons, political reasons, and economic reasons. And at the end, how easy knowledge is shared in an organization or in a project or in an industry, it depends on the balance of these two sides, the forces of the two sides. And then how organizations, teams, experts share their knowledge. And here I would like to sort of push you to think about a whole range of ways. I want to make a bold claim that I already classified all the possible ways of knowledge sharing. Of course, it's not true. I just want to push you to think critically and come up with yet another way of sharing knowledge next to the list that I'm going to present to you and make it even more extensive. The ones that I already classified are: first, when we distribute codified knowledge. I think that's easy. If you look at the examples of organizations, they can document best practices. And then these books of best practices can be codified, can be shared because they are codified knowledge. That's just one way of knowledge sharing. And in fact, very often it's a big mistake of many people that they think knowledge sharing only means this way. Sometimes you can distribute or share the explicit part of knowledge. Remember when we talked about a knowledge domain, we said that part of this knowledge is just the tip of the iceberg. It can be codified. And that is not always the knowledge, the meta information, it's the actual knowledge, but it's only one small part. So imagine that there is an organization who wants to buy a new technology, acquire a new technology, and part of that they receive certain manuals and documents how to operate this machine. I mean, these manuals and documents are some sort of actually codified knowledge. They are part of the whole bigger body of knowledge, which is about the machine, the experts who are coming, and by having them, the organization is pushed to receive and gain the other elements of the knowledge. The other situation is when you share not the knowledge itself, not the codified version, you share the address of someone who knows that knowledge. You need someone who come to your organization and fix, for instance, the security of your information systems. And a friend of you shares with you the contact of a security expert. That piece of information you receive is called this address of knowledge. And there is an interesting guest lecture coming next week by the founder of the GuruScan company, which is a company that offers an interesting application for sharing the address of the knowledge. And if you read to the literature, you will see discussions about transactive memory, when organizations can gain certain knowledge sharing benefits by sharing the address of the experts, the knowers. Sometimes you really want to transfer the tacit knowledge. You really want that expert comes to your organization and fix the security issues that you have. And in those situations, knowledge sharing, in the sense of sharing the tacit knowledge, is more in terms of the mobilizing or transferring the human experts and the teams. And if you think about many large companies, when they need to receive certain knowledge, they just acquire startups. That's a way of actually moving or bringing the knowledge from another organization to their own organization. And finally, certain part of knowledge sharing happens when some objects, artifacts, technologies, machines are acquired. If you look at the examples of the reverse engineering, certain companies buy an example of a device, and then by reverse engineering of that device they try to know what was the design of this system, how it works, and how basically they can make a similar technology as this one. So these are the different ways or types of sharing knowledge. You see, in some cases it's just the tacit knowledge is shared, in some cases the explicit knowledge, and in some other a combination of the two. Again, I push you to think about other ways of the knowledge sharing and see if you can come up with any example which is not included in this list. Just let me wrap up with a few general rules that normally organizations find effective for knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing should not be something extra to their daily work. It should not be artificial. It should not be redundant. Rather, you need to design your work in a way that you naturally share knowledge. Knowledge sharing cannot happen based on the the senders, the ones who have knowledge. It's normally or it's more effective if it's based on those who want to receive. So it should be problem-centric or question-centric. Knowledge sharing should not be out of context. It should be aligned with the context of the work. If you go to certain organizations that people by definition, because of their work, are not into writing down or documentation, sharing codified knowledge is not a good way to go for that. Even if you think about very much codified knowledge sharing, still you should think about human aspects of the knowledge sharing. Who are the ones who want to explicate their knowledge? Who are the ones who want to share? Who are the brokers of the knowledge? And who are the ones who receive this knowledge? And of course, related to that, they need to have good incentives. Otherwise, it becomes something ineffective or just symbolic. That was about just a brief overview of the knowledge sharing. And at the end of this, basically part 2, I would like to introduce the first guest lecturer of this course. Nico is a patent expert. He is someone who helps organizations who have an important knowledge, normally an idea or a design or a product or a service, often very technical, and they want to make a patent out of that. And if you remember the first part of session 4, we talked about the protection of knowledge through patent. In this conversation that Claudia had with Nico, they talk about the ideas of the patent and why patent is important for the codification of the knowledge and protection of that, and how the expertise of someone like Nico help organizations go with the good decisions about when and how they can protect their knowledge through these mechanisms. So make sure that you watch this video, that I will put it on the Canvas, the link on the Canvas, and see how the different ideas that we discussed about the knowledge codification and the knowledge sharing is somehow reflected in the case of patents. I hope you enjoyed these two parts of the session 4. Make sure you check out the discussions on the Canvas, and wish you a very nice time.